And I reiterate, new questions.
I've got no indication, Chair.
I take it from that we now thank the cabinet members.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chair. Councillor Cropper has just put his hand in the chat.
Councillor Cropper, you can be the final question.
It's not a question, it's more of just a statement about what's been going on tonight. I've been listening with quite a lot of interest, and very little thought has been given to the actual population of Over Wyre. It all seems to be focused on the population of Fleetwood and the peninsula. Although not ideal, Garstang is the only leisure centre, leisure facility that we have in Over Wyre since the Pre-Sol pool closed in 2007. And as such, it serves a great deal of the population, or all the population, of the Wyre borough in Over Wyre. Whereas on the peninsula, we've still got Fleetwood Leisure Centre open, we've still got Thornton Leisure Centre open. I know the pool isn't open, but there are adjacent pools that could be utilised in the short term. This is only a trial, and I think we're going round and round in circles, and we're getting very Fleetwood centric, and we're focusing an awful lot on the peninsula. And I think we need to think and focus more on the people in Over Wyre as well. And the fact that if Fleetwood Centre opens, yes, they won't have the travel, but the travel from my area in Pre-Sol and Knott End is around 25-30 minutes to the Fleetwood pool. Those are the sorts of things that I would like to see taken into consideration, not just the travelling time of the people on the peninsula. It's the people Over Wyre. If you look at some of the outlying places, to get to Fleetwood, you're probably talking 40-45 minutes, and the public transport isn't very good over there. So I'd just like to put that into the mix, because it seems to be very, very peninsula centric and not much talk of Over Wyre. And I shall leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cropper. And I would agree, as councillors, we represent all the borough and not just parts of it. I just perhaps Councillor Beavers, if you just want to sum up before you leave the meeting.
Sorry, I didn't know that I was allowed to sum up. So I'd just like to thank everybody for listening. I was quite shocked that Councillor Vincent could speak. I didn't realise that it was also his decision, and for so long on some political and throw his political points in. I thought that didn't do the meeting very well. I would just like to say it's not Fleetwood centric, it's about all of the pools. It's not just about whether it be Fleetwood or whether it be Garstang, it's about all our leisure facilities. Fleetwood obviously is the place that I live in, and it's a place I represent. And it's got massive pockets of deprivation. 50% of the population in Fleetwood do not drive. So when you're talking about sending them to Moor Park, which is overused, you can't get in there, it's so busy, it's not an option at all. And what we haven't spoke about today, and I blame myself for this, is the swimming clubs. You know, the Fleetwood Swimming Club spends £45,000 a year at Fleetwood. That's how much Fleetwood Swimming Baths gets from the Fleetwood Swimming Club. And people from Pre-Sol and Knott End and Thornton and Poulton come to that pool because of the size of it and because of the lanes and everything else. So when we're considering which pool should be kept open and which one shouldn't, I still believe that all pools should be open. Poulton should and Fleetwood should. And when you're talking about the £28,000, I'd like to say that those figures are your figures that you presented to the Cabinet. They're not our figures, they're your figures. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Beavers, and Councillor Bowen and Councillor Alan Vincent. Do you want to make any final comments?
Yeah, well, I would like to say a few words. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, when Councillor Beaver says this was got political. Well, I have to say, when there's a Facebook put up by the Labour Party in Fleetwood saying "Save our pool" when the pool has never been threatened with closure, I regard that as a political campaign, not as anything else. And I want to save the pool as well. We all want to save the pool, and nobody's ever threatened it. So I'm not taking a lecture about being political. Basically, in terms of the figures, if we carried on as per the figures that were set out in the original cabinet report, and if the pools and the leisure centres carried on losing money as they have been doing, and bearing in mind that I've already alluded to the fact earlier that the figures since we reopened don't look great, then the combined loss over this year and next year would be £2,137,770. And that amounts to, bearing in mind that 1% of our council tax raises £72,000, that amounts to a loss which I could recover it, or we could recover by putting up the council tax of by 25.6%. So that's the scale of the problem that we're facing here, because we can't put up the council tax by 25.6%. It's not allowed by the government. They will allow us to do 2% only. And if we want more than that, you'd have to have a referendum. Well, does anybody seriously want to put a referendum to the people of Wyre, the residents, saying, do you mind if we take 25% more from you next year when you've had the worst year in living memory? I doubt it, because I certainly don't want to do that. And the only other option that would be available to us then would be to make cuts. And I'll say for those councillors who don't realise, or those people out there listening to this, that the only cuts that we could make essentially would be to what are called non-statutory services. So in other words, things that we don't have to do by law. And there aren't that many of those. And they include things like the Marine Hall, the Little Thornton Theatre. They include things like care and repair, and they're all things that we want to keep. They're all things that we want to save. So we have to work together to find a solution for this, and not make it a political football, because we really do need to make sure that we have decent provision, but we've got to have decent provision that we can afford, because we can't start cutting back on other vital service areas to pay for it. And we can't start hiking up council tax to pay for it. So let's all be grown-ups and recognise that that is what we need to do, and make it happen.
Thank you, Councillor Vincent, and thank you for your assistance for this evening. Likewise to Councillor Beavers and to Councillor
Chairman, we now will bow out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Oops. I'm minded now to go straight to the vote. Is the rest of the committee in agreement?
Sorry, Chair, can I just find out whether we're actually, are we still live with the public here?
I believe we are, Councillor Fail.
Right. I mean, I'd just like to say a few things first. And I don't think going to the vote now is completely inappropriate in my view. It would be like being in a court of law, and we've just heard the evidence from the prosecution, the defence, and we're having a vote on whether somebody's guilty or not guilty. Well, to me, you actually discuss what the issues raised were. Now, those issues, to me, in a nutshell, this committee must objectively, not subjectively, determine whether a sound or unsound decision was made. So committee members should ask themselves, were all the options considered and documented? Was all the necessary data presented? Were all the options considered based on sound data? And were all the issues properly considered? Now, those are the questions members should be asking themselves. And if the honest answer to any of those is no, then the portfolio holder must be asked to reconsider the decision, and where necessary, rework the report to fill in any gaps or errors in those reports. So I think it'd be a good idea for the committee to go through each of these questions in turn. Were all the options considered and documented? Was all the necessary data presented? Were all the options considered based on sound data? And were all the issues properly considered? And if we do that one by one, I think we'll soon come to a decision. But what we shouldn't be doing is just looking at, I mean, there's lots of questions there, lots of answers, but unless we sort that out into some sort of order, I don't see how we can possibly come to a fair decision. It needs to be logical, and that's about look at the call in on page 5, and it talks about those things I've just mentioned, which is the options and the presentation of the data and whether it was sound or unsound and issues. Those are the things we should be looking at. So I would ask that the committee goes through each of those full in turn, and people can have their say on whether they thought there was something, whether the answer is yes or no, and you know, people can look at them and have their own view. But I think we need to be doing that to come to a fair conclusion rather than voting on something we haven't discussed as a committee. You're on mute, John. Councillor Ibbotson, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Councillor Ellison, you want to make comment?
Sorry, I've just done the same thing then. I left it on mute. Yeah, I actually agree with Councillor Fail. I thought, you know, we should have a debate on it because I think there was quite a lot of issues that we could do with sort of going through. You know, having a look at the actual call-in request, it's not, we've not got to make a decision which pools are opened or shut or which gyms. The decision we're being asked to make is whether or not, you know, the decision was correct, not correct, but whether it was done properly, basically. And I think there's quite a few things that I certainly have looked at with regards to the figures. You know, them not being split. I think we needed really to see the Fleetwood pool figure split. So I do agree with that point that the figures haven't really been great. And there seems to be some other figures that have been sent now. So I do think from that point of view, I think it should be reconsidered based on the fact that, you know, the figures aren't great and we could do with, you know, better split. With regards to was put on that, I'd actually done my own research. I don't drive, so I'd looked at the buses and the travel distances, and I do agree with what the cabinet had said. There is a swimming pool within 20 minutes of everybody, really. You know, Fleetwood does have Moor Park. With Garstang, the nearest pools, from what I've seen on Google Maps, seem to be sort of 30-40 minutes away, which I've got to say, from Thornton, I get the bus to Fleetwood swimming baths, and that does take me 40 minutes, 30 on the bus and a 10-minute walk. So 40 minutes on the bus there and 40 minutes on the bus back, you know, for a bus is quite a, I would assume, a reasonable travel distance. But actually in a car or, you know, even if you get a bus, it's 55 minutes to Moor Park. It's not that bad at a travel distance, but I do think that's just if it's a short-term measure. So if it was a short-term measure, the pool was shut and we had no other option, then I think Moor Park is doable. And I also looked at Palatine. You can get a tram from Fleetwood right up the prom to Palatine. It's slightly longer, but it's a direct service. So, you know, that's another option as well. But obviously in a car, then it's quite a bit shorter. So I can understand why they've opened Garstang, because there is quite a wide area around it that doesn't have a public swimming pool. Yes, there are some private gyms, but then you have to pay the gym and swimming pool membership, whereas a lot of people just want a gym membership. Just want a pool membership, which is why the figures concern me, because it doesn't split them. And there might be a lot of people going to Fleetwood just to use the pool, and they might have a full gym membership, but they use the pool more, and they decided not to renew it or start paying again because it's going to mean that they're not going to be getting the full service that they're paying for. So I do think we need to have a look at, or it does need to be reconsidered.